So we'll get started in just a couple minutes. I see the recording is already going, but we'll give those that need to connect into Microsoft Teams a few minutes to log in and get online. But good to see you two here today so far. So we have this class. We're going to talk today about managing within your own company. This is an interesting topic. Um, it's a very interesting topic. We can um, you can see the connections as we talk about this. Certainly, this is a class in, as you know, in selling skills and sales operations, and we'll talk about how a salesperson fits into their company and the different uh, people and systems that they need to have in place to be successful. But as we're all in a company, even if we work for ourselves, we're in our own business dealing with other people. You kind of see how these relationships, because this is a chapter about relationship building, kind of pulling it all together. How do you communicate effectively, as you can kind of see as we start to talk about this. Um, but before we get into this chapter, our next chapter is all about managing your career. Um, put a plug into next week because it's a really important topic. Um, the last chapter of the book, chapter 17, if you've not yet looked at that, and you don't have to have done that because that's next week's topic. Managing your career is a lot about, we'll talk about interviewing and building a resume and positioning yourself. A lot of the skills that we've talked about already, because we're selling ourselves in pretty much every environment, every situation that we have with our company, with the person, with the potential prospect, the customers. We're always selling something. A lot of times it's selling us in the relationship, that we can be trustworthy, that we can be counted on to provide a good product or service or consulting or whatever it is that we're doing. And so we'll see how that fits, because that's a really good capstone chapter. Um, but that's a wonderful way to finish the course. And so as we go through this particular chapter, you'll kind of start to see how a lot of the areas we talked about, obviously communication skills, adaptive selling, the matrices that we talk about in terms of personality profiles, handling objections, being able to overcome those in a different way that maybe we hadn't thought about before. Looking at another word, sounds like objections, it's not, objectives, planning, figuring out how to plan who we're talking with. Um, and a question I've asked this class a couple of times, and if you kind of think about for you and your role in your company, what do you personally want to be known as? What do you want to be known as in your company? What do you want to be known as with your boss? What do you want to be known as with your clients? What do you want to be known as with your colleagues? So, this question of what do I want to be known as is about who you are and how you want to present yourself. And that is this chapter in a nutshell, because you could kind of see that the learning objectives here, how do salespeople coordinate efforts in the different functional areas of the company. Now, we're in companies and you have different areas within your company. There's sales and marketing. Those might be separate, those might be one. You have the accounting finance group, you have the customer service group, you have the people producing if you have a product or service, you have the tech support people. Um, Even if you're in engineering, you have all these functional areas. And as a good salesperson, as a good person in your company, it's important to understand how to relate to each functional area. Um, We'll talk a little bit about how, and again, if you're not in sales, you can see how this directly applies to your role, how salespeople work with their sales managers as sales executives, but how you can enhance how you work with your boss, your manager, your boss's boss. Okay, so there's a lot of pieces here. And then within this process, which areas of your company help you the most to satisfy your customers' needs. So how do you use the company resources to best enhance your job? And again, it's not just sales, right? If you work for a consulting company, if you work for a software company, if you're an engineer, how do you use your company resources to enhance your role in what you do? Right? It's more than just, if we were in the physical office, it's more than just them supplying pads of paper and pens, um, or a connection to the internet. It's all the intellectual resources, the people you can go to for help, how they can help you, how they can help position you. Um, and as we talk about the sales selling process, gathering information is so important. Information about your potential prospects, your customers, gathering information about the industry. All those functional areas at your company could absolutely help you gather that data. Okay. And then we'll talk a little bit about, and this is important, and I know a few of you on the call today, on this class today, have talked about this, company policies and how those impact your role and your job. Certainly, there's compensation, um, right? How much we get paid, but the policies that the company, your boss set for you, and how they influence your role in day to day operations. That's important because if they give you a quota, how many people you need to talk to, or how many sales dollars you need to bring in, or how much of the project that you're managing gets done in a specific period of time. Well, you have to have metrics and you have to know what those are if they could put these parameters on you. And then we'll talk a little bit about, from this standpoint, how do salespeople work to resolve problems, issues that arise, right? And there's always problems, whether they're ethical or not. They could just be customer service issues, but how do you help your customers work within that? And then we would talk a little bit about the structure of the organization and how that influences how we do things, right? Do you have a direct line to your boss? How often are you able to talk to your tech support people or the customer service people? Do you have a way to, if your client is having an issue, do you have a way, a go-to person within the other functional areas of your sales operations of your company, even if you're not in sales? If your customer is having a problem, say, with paying their bills? Do you have an accounting person at your company that you can help them, put them in contact with? If they're not getting resolutions and they're your customer, do you have a way to intercede to help them? Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about today. I think it's really kind of a key way. Um, this phrase here. This is really a key: internal partnerships. Right. We've been talking a lot about partnerships with others in terms of outside your organization, partnership with another potential business, a partnership with your buyer, a partnership with a seller, right? A supplier. But this business of internal partnerships is really critical, something we haven't really touched much on. Because if you kind of think about it, those at your company are also your customers in a way because you represent the company that you work for. You're an ambassador for the company you work for the products and services you sell. So those that also work for your company in very different areas that you work for, maybe some of the same, maybe some very different, are your customers in a sense because they help you. They can help you satisfy the needs of your direct uh, customers. Okay. And so as you start to think about it, aside from the products, the resources that we have with a company are so important. And then it allows us this ability, if we're good at this, if we get really good at working with the different functional areas of our business, it directly impacts our ability to be effective. Certainly our sales will increase, but your ability to manage your territory, to manage your clients, to satisfy their needs, to overcome objections, to reach your goals are directly related to how well you work with the functional areas in your company. All right. So this word internal partnerships is really key. So think about this again. From the role of a salesperson, you're selling your company, your products, and your services to customers. Basic, right? Of course. And we're selling our customers' needs to our company and giving them solutions. Okay. So that's important. If you could kind of think about it, again, we're an ambassador to, you think about it this way, it changes maybe how you perceive your role within your company. We are an ambassador to the company we work for. We are the frontline person with whomever it is we're talking. Now, maybe we don't see a lot of customers. Maybe we're an engineer, okay? But we still produce a product or a service that helps the customer. And those other functional areas that work directly with customers outside the company count on us. Therefore, these internal partnerships are critical. And so you can kind of see here to serve our customers well, we have to rely on the personnel in the different roles in our organization. That's critical, right? If you're a one-man show, more like me, you still have partners, and I still have people that I use to support me. So I look at those different areas and I make sure those relationships of the internal side are thriving. And if they're not, I work on them to make sure that they're moving towards that way of thriving. So think about this, these questions here. How well can your coworkers help you? Are you easy to get along with? That's a good question. Are you always only reaching out to people in your company when you have a problem? Now, that might be the role, and your company might set up parameters. They don't want a lot of fluff communication going on. But it sets up a little bit of a dynamic that if you're always only contacting your people in your company in the different functional areas when you have a problem that you need something, and again, their role might be to help you. But you know what? You might want to share some of your successes with these people. You might want to share how well you're doing because of how they support you. And that becomes a really big issue and a big help for you. So then you could kind of think about here, and we talk about spin selling. Remember that book that I had recommended by Neil Rackham, Spin Selling, the situational types questions? It's just questioning methods, right? And so these questioning methods we could use to help understand how the people in our company, those folks, and how we can better communicate with them. What do they need? How do I work with them? How can they work with me to be effective and efficient? Okay. Because if I'm not as organized as I need to be, and if I give them information that's disorganized, they're going to have a harder time sifting through. So, for instance, if I'm talking to my customer service group or my tech support group, and I say this person has an issue to contact them, that may be one thing. But if I set up what the issue is ahead of time, they're having an issue with, okay, They keep going into this part of the software program, and it's not working in terms of their way of managing inventory. And they're getting this particular pop-up or this bug that needs to be addressed, or it's not letting them change the parameters within their inventory. Then you already have an idea of specifics. Then you go to your functional area in your company and say, this person, Mohammed, at the buyer for this particular company is having issues managing his inventory with our software in these particular ways. We need to get him help. That's better than saying, Mohammed at this company has a problem you need to deal with, right? So start to think about how we communicate with those in our internal partnership. Okay. So some principles we can kind of consider that are important. Selling internally. Okay. When we say selling internally, we're talking about how do I, as a salesperson, how do I, as an engineer, how do I, as a software producer, whomever, somebody in customer service, how do I sell what I need to those in my company? Okay. Obviously, it's the big thing is accepting responsibility. If there's a problem going on and I caused it as a salesperson, maybe I wasn't a good listener and I shipped in the wrong product to my company. I've used this example before, in terms of a suit manufacturer, you're producing different women's and men's clothing, suits and coats. And maybe when I went to the store and took the order, they said we need 50 of the small size and 25 of the medium size, and I reversed it. That's my issue. Okay. Now I have to work with customer service and inventory to fix it, and I have to accept responsibility. I messed up. What can we do? I messed up as a salesperson. We need to get the customer the products in the quantity he needs. Okay. And that way you start off by telling people, and they appreciate that, right? Because you're honest. um, Obviously you're appealing to the higher objective. We all want to have a happy customer. We all want our clients to be happy in terms of the products and services that they're using. So we're appealing to that, right? It's not like we're competing with the people that we work with in our company. I know oftentimes it feels like that, right? Because of the way the company sets up their systems, the way they set up their internal conversations sometimes. But we're not actually competing with people. In a sense, I mean, sometimes we are competing for them for maybe that promotion, right? That's a possibility. But but this higher objective is to satisfy the end user's needs, right? Whether that's the client, the buyer, um, whoever's using our service or our product. All right, and then you could kind of start to understand here that there's needs that the customer has. We have needs, and they have needs, and so these internal customer needs we can address, right? If we're always if we're working with our tech support group of our company and they have a form that needs to be filled out to outline the problem of our customer so they can handle it better, are we filling out the form in the way that we should? Even if it's an online form and we have to put in all the contact information for the customer, are we updating our CRM system, our contact relationship management system, so that the different people that use that, not just the salesperson, but the boss, maybe customer support, uses that system? Are we keeping that updated enough? Okay. And then are we, this is an interesting one, avoiding personalizing the issues. So maybe you had a bad day, and because you had a bad day, You didn't listen very carefully to your customer, your client. Okay. And are you then getting mad at your client because, maybe they're a little touchy? They had a bad day too. Are you personalizing that and saying, you know what, when you have to get my client has to talk to the tech support. Personalizing it is, you know, this person is very difficult to deal with, and I can't stand dealing with them in this way. You need to handle it, and then it's like you're just throwing that out to somebody else to handle for you. And if we're good, here's another key. Think about this. If we're good selling internally ourselves and our role, we can be better prepared to negotiate, because here's the thing. You could talk to your boss. Again, it's out. If you're not in sales, this is very directly relatable to that. You have to ask your boss or your manager for something sometimes, right? Maybe to take time off, maybe to give you more money, a raise, maybe to help you get more resources to handle a project with a client. And so if you're good at selling yourself, accepting responsibility, appealing to the higher objective, understanding the sense of urgency that happens with your customer, and not personalizing everything by always complaining, understanding this. Yes, I'm going to have to negotiate with my boss at some point, my manager at some point, the customer service people at some point, the people that run the inventory at some point, the tech group. See what I'm saying here? Because we're going to have to, we might say, call in a favor, ask for help. If we're good at selling internally, comes back to that question. You what do I want to be known as? Do I want to be known as a difficult person, or do I want to be known as, Professor Todd? He is always gets me the right information in enough detail and follows up with me and is not a hard person to deal with and doesn't complain if I have other projects, and I can't get to them right away. Or do you want to be known as the complainer or the hard person, right? Now, we have different personality styles. If we are a driver, if we are more that kind of personality style, well, we're going to want to push a little bit harder, right? We're not going to be as like expressive people and sharing and be, happy all the time. We're going to be more serious. That's okay too, absolutely, as long as you're accepting responsibility, understanding the needs of your customer and their needs, right? Okay, so again, if you have any questions as we go through this, just type them in the chat. But here's a good kind of thing if you think about the different functional areas that are important to salespeople. And as I put this up, think about in your company, based on your role, what's missing here? What do we need to add for your company? Okay, so for a salesperson, obviously, if you're selling a product, it's the manufacturing, it's the people in your warehouse, it's the people that um, administration, the human resources. Make sure you get paid. Make sure if you take time off, that gets handled. Um, it's the customer service team. It's the marketing. Again, sometimes sales and marketing are all in the same group. But also, you think about there's tech support, there's the finance and accounting. Maybe that's part of the administration group. But just think about those areas that are important to you and ask yourself this question. Do I have a go to person? Do I have a good relationship? What am I known as within those functional areas to my company? Not what you would like to be. I guess that's important too. But being realistic. What are you known as? And again, you could be a hard driver. They could know you as a hard driver. That's okay. But again, as long as you follow and are respectful and you get things done and they can rely on you, that you're not going to, throw them under the bus. That analogy is, blame them for the tech issue that your client is having, right? Sometimes that is the case. Maybe they mess up, but you don't want to throw them under the bus. You don't want to, you know, tell your client, oh, it's this problem person in the tech group. That's the problem. It's not my company per se, it's this person. No, it is your company because they represent your company. That's what we're talking about here. All right, so let's go into a little bit of these functional areas. Again, if you're not in sales, start to think about those areas in your company that are important to you and make sure you have a way, a channel, a direct communication line. And if you don't, if it's not as it needs to be, think about ways to improve that. Okay, so again, sales, the manufacturing piece. Obviously, your company is concerned with producing a product at the best possible price, right? It does not, your company doesn't want to waste a lot of resources producing the product, creating the service, the software, right? Right, of course. So you have to think about that. You have to think about in that relationship. And as you develop these relationships with manufacturing, when I was in the uh, the textbook business, selling, and publishing and higher education, selling textbooks to professors, I would spend a day or some time at the people that built our textbooks, the physical books, the printers. I would spend a day. I would see how they printed a four-color book with graphics, how they would bind it, how they would put it in a cover. Sometimes it was a spiral bound. You might have seen that, like a spiral bound notebook. Sometimes it was loose leaf. Sometimes it was packaged with some software or even a specific uh, envelope that contained an access code to an online software. And I would see how they created that product, and I would talk to their workers, because if they had bottlenecks, if they had issues with misprinting some of our products, some of our books, I wanted to know what went into that. And if it's a 600-page book, or like this Castleberry book, there's a lot of pages there. Now it's all digital now, right? So you're seeing it digitally, but back then when I sold it, it was a physical book. And so a lot went into that. How did they ship those books? How did they, when they were all done, how did they put them on pallets and ship them to either our warehouse as a company? Or here's something also, if they were late in producing a product, a book, and there wasn't enough time to ship it to the publisher, our company's warehouse, they had an option, some of these, to ship directly to the bookstore. That is a lot of logistics to set up. And if I didn't go to the printer and understand how much that went into doing that, I would be so demanding. I'm like, yeah, they should be able to do that. Well, they had to really go through a lot of hoops to be able to do that, because here's the thing: these printers, they're not just printing the books from my company. They're printing the books from other publishers. They're printing the books, and not only books, they're printing um, magazines and all kinds of different periodicals from many different companies. And so they have customers. I was one of their customers. So, in order to understand how they did business, that helped me. And so I went to the manufacturer. Okay, big importance. I have a friend. He worked for DHL at one time. The overnight, the package delivery service. And so he would always make sure he would spend time in the warehouse and seeing how the people in the warehouse sort packages, the problems they have. and it's a big deal. If you can understand how they do their job, and then an issue arises in shipping, then you can understand maybe a little bit more about how to get things resolved. So that's important. It's this, we use this word collaborative relationship. Close collaborative relationship can we have? Um, and that helps everybody. Okay, administration. Think about this. You have health care for your job, probably. Probably. Hopefully. What if you have an issue with that? Do you have somebody in your company you can call to say, you know what? I need to get to the dentist, and the dental plan is not, uh, the dentist said it's not working. Do you have somebody you can call? Do you have somebody you can call when the compensation you're being paid is not correct? Time off. Um, so start to think about, here's also a big deal. Your customer, your client has to pay their bills, right? What if your customer client is not paying their bills on time? It directly impacts you. Let me take myself off mute here. Let's see. Um, okay. Yeah, if you could just make sure you keep yourself on mute if you're not have a question or you're not talking, because that gives a lot of feedback. Sounded like somebody was in an airport, didn't it? Okay. Um, so maybe somebody's traveling. That's fine, but just try to keep it on mute here. So again, if your customer is not paying their bills, maybe there's some credit problems. I've had this before. When I was selling in the varnish and stains business for hardwood floors, I had some customers that would rack up thousands of dollars they would have tens of thousands of dollars of products. They weren't very timely in paying their bills. Me as a salesperson, of course, I would want to continue to sell product. But if they're not paying their bills, my company's not going to be very willing to continue to sell product to them. That directly impacts me. So if I have a good relationship with administration and I vouch for them and say, you know what, they're having a hard time, but I understand one of their suppliers hasn't paid them their bills either. And so when they get paid, which it looks like the end of this month, they'll be able to pay us. So if you have that relationship with those people, I remember there was in this uh, role I had with a company called Varathane Flecto, which is the company that produced these clear finishes, this hardwood floor finishes. I would pick up the phone and call Wendy. Wendy was the head of our credit, and I would explain to her specific customers. Baird Brothers Sawmill can't pay their bills. They brought in a ton of product. Um, and I would say, can we give them another 60 days to pay their bills? And if I had a good relationship, I didn't always, wasn't always able to get it, but a lot of times I would say, you know what? If you think that they can manage and pay their bill in 60 days, we'll give them extended credit. And so we're able to do that. And so that makes it, you know, um, a win-win. We talked about that, right? A negotiation, a win-win. This is a win-win. It's a win for me as a salesperson or as an employee. It's a win for the credit person and the company, and it's a win for the customer. So it's a win, win, win. You can directly create that because we now have a relationship with these internal relationships, these internal resources. Let's talk about shipping. If you work for a company that has a product or service, mostly a product, right? But service, there's installing software, right? There's the time it takes. My brother's a project, he's a head of a project management team. So he doesn't have a product per se, he manages all the projects. And if he has a good relationship with his shipping group, because his company produces products, if he has a good relationship with his shipping group, he'll be able to do his job better because he'll get better information. He'll see bottlenecks that occur before they happen and be able to anticipate things. So that's an important piece. So again, have a good relationship with those that install and ship the products. Because again, it's like they can help you directly impact your sales, your role in your company. This is a big one, right? Especially nowadays, when so much is sold and done online. Customer service. Do we have a good relationship with those in our company that handle customer service? Think about this for you. You have a product you purchase from a store and you're trying to, and there's a problem with it, and you call the company and they have poor customer service. Imagine that company also has a salesperson. How do you think if you have a problem with their customer service group, do you think their salesperson might have a problem with their customer service group? Probably. And so the relationship and how you interact with customer service is critical because obviously customer service is there to help service a customer, right? To make sure things go smoothly. And if they don't, to handle the issues that arise as they arise, right? So having a close relationship with support, with your technical group means, what does that mean? Better, faster, more direct information that you get. A lot of times your customer, think about this, if they have a problem, sometimes they don't contact you. Maybe they call customer service directly at your company. This has happened before. This has happened a lot of times. So again, when I was selling in the textbook business, a professor, my customer, had problem with the testing software. They were building a test. I put exams up on Moodle, and you all see that in all your classes, right? So there's the companies that supply software to be able to produce those tests, to help produce those tests. The professor can create whatever they want, but it's nice to have some software to go with it. Well, a lot of times the software has bugs and doesn't work very well. I had an issue with that with McGraw-Hill. And so does your customer call tech support directly? And you have no idea what's going on. So I was in the book business. I had a professor I was dealing with, and they were having issues with testing software. They didn't tell me right away. They were getting very irritated to the point where I walked into their office. They said to me, I think I'm dropping your book. I think I'm going to drop it. It's thousands of dollars worth of product in maybe an intro psychology course. And so like, oh, what's going on? I've been having problems with the software. Oh, you didn't call me? No, I've been calling Hilda from tech support. She's been horrible to deal with. The software has just been, taking me all these extra hours and I can't get the product. I can't put this into my learning management system, my online um, system. And so then it directly impacts you, right? So if your customer service, your tech group was dealing with a customer and it's an issue and they tell you about it, then you could be more resourceful and know ahead of time that your customer is having an issue. If they didn't tell you, you can walk into a minefield, which is what happens a lot of times, right? So that relationship with customer service is so critical because another reason is they know the product performance with your customers better than you do sometimes because you cannot, this is a role of a salesperson, um, you do not want to spend all your time servicing your customer. You're a salesperson. Service is an important part, but not all the time. So you can't be following up through every single stage of the selling process once they got the product in their store. You got to have people at your company you can rely on. But those people, customer service, understand what's happening, what are the better products. Maybe, again, you're selling suits. And coats, maybe those that store owner who has 10 stores, maybe they've had problems with a particular coat because the buttons keep falling off. They didn't let you know. They work directly with your customer service group. And because of that, your customer service group know that this particular coat had problems with the buttons falling off. Now, if you had a good relationship with your customer service, they would let you know that ahead of time. Well, you know what, X coat that we got from this manufacturer, because it's an outdoor coat, it's thick wool. Um, a lot of times they don't reinforce the buttons well enough, so they fall off. Wouldn't you, if as a customer, wouldn't you like to know that ahead of time that that's a possible issue that might arise? Might you not sell that as much? Might you alert the customer, hey, we've had this issue. It's a great coat. Sometimes we have issues with the buttons. And if you do, let us know. We'll send you out new ones right away. Then it becomes this handling objections ahead of time. That's adaptive selling. And if you have a good relationship with customer service, you could be more adaptive at your selling, right? Think about this in your own role as in your company. You could be more adaptive at your communication style if you have people that you can count on to give you more information. Handling complaints, right? It's also about, here's a piece too, you got to train your customers in the products and services. It's not only up to you as a salesperson, as an employee. So again, customer service can help train your people, your clients, on certain aspects of how they're using the software, of the features of the product and how to use that, how to maintain the product. So how to service the product themselves, because again, if it's a manufacturer of high ticket items, big machines that produce things, if they know how to treat them well, they won't break down you know as easily. Okay. So let's move along here. Let's talk a little bit about marketing. Think about this. Marketing and sales should be highly coordinated. Again, sometimes they're the same group, um, sometimes they're not. And so, though marketing and sales teams support your role as a salesperson directly, because they're marketing to your customers potentially, or they're marketing in the industry that you work in. Okay. Or they show promotions that are going on within your company that you could get more business from. And so, my marketing team, like in terms of when I was at the book business, we had a marketing team that would promote new products, new books, new authors coming to write products and books, new ways of um, new things that we can introduce for a student in the classroom, for you guys, for you all, right? Support for you to do better in the classroom. Okay, different online components so that you could maybe take quizzes on your own. They have those with Castleberry, by the way. Um, Not just my quizzes, but they have a website. Did you know that? Maybe. Um, if you did, it's kind of late in the semester, but maybe some of your other classes in next semester, you could benefit from that. So just know that a lot of these books have their own resources online. And so those people, my marketing group in the textbook business, created all that stuff, made my job easier, because then I can go to the customer and say, you know what, we have this, and this to help you do better at your job in the classroom. So think about that. And then here's the piece too. Since you're the front line as a salesperson, you directly see the customer. You could know what's working and what's not, and feed back information to marketing and sales to tell them, you know what, um, the software in this testing program is not working very well. Or, you know what, those student readings that were additional into the textbook that we put online. They're missing a few pages. Somebody, when they added them in, they put in only the odd number readings, not even number readings too. And you can let them, oh wow, we could go online and add those in, right? Or somebody's having problems getting in, dialing in, getting into the with their password and username. It's not authenticating them very well. You think back to the very first one of the very first classes I taught, right? Microsoft Teams, it, it was authenticating and it required uh, additional passwords for me to put in that I didn't have. And it was like, it took an hour to get that resolved, if you remember way back when. Don't want to remind you about that, but things happen, issues happen, right? And so we need to be able to resolve that. Hopefully, now that I had a problem, right, the marketing at Windsor University will understand, well, okay, maybe another professor might have an issue, so we need to get that handled a little bit better, streamlining how Microsoft Teams interrelates with what I'm doing and how I'm teaching online, right? So that all we support each other. So I can feed information back to marketing. Marketing can help and support me. So let's talk about this for a moment here. Excuse me a sec. Okay, sales management, sales executives, your boss, your manager. In terms of the internal relationships, how well is your relationship with your manager, your direct report, if you work in a company that has a direct report, a manager? And think about this, those that are above your manager, your direct report, the hierarchy, right? Obviously, the top people, the owner of the business, the CEO, the board of directors, all those people set policies that come down the chain to the regional manager, to your sales manager, to your boss's boss, to their boss. Okay. And so all those pieces are important because they play a vital role in determining company strategy. So think about this, for salespeople, salesperson, or for even for you, think about this. Those sales executives, the sales management, your boss, are setting up the parameters for how you do business, how you manage your products, if you're a software engineer, how you're designing that, your role, right? So they dictate new markets and products. They dictate the sales forecast. They dictate the prices we should charge. Do they dictate the competition? In a sense, yes, because they determine where we're selling to, in what industry we're at, how competitive we are with our products and our services. If we're a premium product, a premium service, which means that we're the high end, the high value of the marketplace, maybe there's not a lot of competition there. But if we're at the middle or the lower end, maybe there's a lot more competition. So your company might decide, you know what, our software is such that it's such a premium product. We want to add some new features into it. And because of that, we're going to be raising the overall cost to develop it. So the overall price to the customer, the client, is going to be more. And so if you have good feedback to them to say, you know what, our current customers can't support the additional price point that you're offering, then you might have a say in some of these uh, roles that your top management play. And if you're a good salesperson, if you're a good showing support, and you do well, they trust you. They could get information from you. They might all of a sudden change their policy. They might not, right? Um, so let's move along a little bit here. Um, Sales management. Depending on how large your organization is, it could be enormous, right? You could have lots of layers of management. Or, like a lot of companies, they're downsizing. My brother went to a new firm, a manufacturing firm, um, and he's in project management. And so he said that a lot of the layers of management were cut off, let go. So now he can report directly to the chief information officer. And that streamlined his role a lot better. Before, there were like 4 layers of management in between there, but his company got bought out by private equity, so it's not privately held. And what is private equity? If you've ever worked for a company and your company has been bought out, sold to somebody that's in private equity, a lot of times the first thing they're going to do is look at, okay, how can we save money? Who are all the extra layers of management that we can lop off? And sometimes it's like Elon Musk at Twitter gets the company and says, okay, we're getting rid of 50% of the salespeople. He didn't say that directly. He said you're gonna have to work 10 times as hard for more hours and probably the same amount of pay. And so a lot of people left, right? It was a very large organization, Twitter. Eventually, hopefully he will get it more efficient. But a lot of people left, and it was very difficult for those people that stayed on. So just kind of start to think about the sales executives. They determine how many salespeople. The sales executives, the executives at your company determine how many employees in your project group, how many engineers in your group, how many people that are managing the software that you do. Okay, just kind of start to think about, maybe they'll add another person in your group, and you might look at that as, they're taking away my role a little bit. That could be. Do you have a good relationship with your boss, your boss's boss, the sales management, the organization executives? And obviously here to also, the sales management team forecasts. They set a forecast. Here's how much money we want to be making in the next year. And because of that, we want to grow by 12%. Each individual sales team needs to grow by 12%. How does that work out? Knowing this ahead of time, if you have a good internal relationship with these people, these sales team managers, and they set a goal of 12%, which you think in your particular territory is nearly impossible, which it's happened to me. There were a couple of years in the selling in the textbooks where I would call on universities where the enrollment in the university went down significantly because of the economy, because of various reasons, at a community college, And so sometimes if there's less students taking the classes, certainly there's less people buying books. And if there's less people buying books, it makes my job harder because then I have to sell a lot more. So if my company gives me a 12% goal, this happened actually, they gave me like a 20% goal one year. But in the region that I worked in, a lot of the enrollments at the universities were actually down. So 20% goal for me really meant I'd have to increase my business by 40% because of less enrollment, less potential buyers. And that was very difficult. So what I did, knowing that ahead of time, I would feed that information to the executives. This school is down 27%. This school is down 30%. This school is they're doing okay there, but they're only down 10%. And so positioning, that word, How do we sell ourselves within our company? Positioning, think about this in your role with your boss. Looking ahead, projecting out ahead of time, potential issues that might arise, and feeding information to set things up. Okay. If you're at your job right now and things aren't going very well, okay, and you're thinking, well, I might want to start interviewing for a new job. Okay. That's great. What are you doing now while you're working for your current company? Not just to look out and see what roles there are. What are you doing now as you start to think about that? Obviously, you're taking this class, you're enrolled in this university, so you're fine tuning your um, your worth in terms of your pedigree, your resume, your vita, right? Eventually, you could say you have a completed degree. Okay. You've taken these classes. You can improve yourself in that way. What are the other relationships that you're finding out? If again, within your company, things aren't going well, how are you starting to position yourself in the marketplace? And maybe you can see in 6 months to a year, things are not going to go well in your company. Maybe you have an idea. Not that you're a pessimist, but you're a realist. You're seeing it's harder in your company. And there's other companies out there that might offer a better opportunity for you. This is realistic, right? And so if you are able to see what's happening, you can kind of position yourself. Maybe you know your company is going to have some hard times. You need to position yourself as more the go-to resource within your company. So you're known as that. So you're providing extra value internally. So when they start lopping off employees, you'll be the last one that they think to cut because you're the most valuable. What are you doing now that can help you build your value in your company? That's a really good question. Bet you that's not in your book. What are you personally doing now that will build your value with your company? You may be doing already a lot of things, but think about that question because maybe there's an area you're missing that you could add value more so. All right. Obviously, again, with sales, you have a budget. You're a salesperson, especially we'll get into this outside selling. You might travel a little bit for your current company, right? You might in your role, you're not in sales, but you travel for your company. They pay your expenses, right? Do they have a budget? Do you have a budget? Can you go and have a steak dinner every night if you're traveling for your company that they'll pay for? Probably not. Um, can you um, just spend and sit in first class if you travel? If you're executive, maybe, but most employees not, right? So they set the parameters for budgets. And so how well, this is part of the role of a salesperson or part of your job, how well do you manage your expenses? In fact, I know into my bonus plan with a lot of my companies, they built in a bonus if you manage your expenses well. If you constantly went over, they took money away. Incentive to not spend too much, right? Um, so just start to think about that. There's also this, we talked a little bit about this, right? Upper management sets quotas. They set the control, meaning that how we are to manage our territories, the parameters. They set quotas, minimum levels of activity that's acceptable. How many customers must you see in a day? How many leads must you follow up on? How much sales must you provide? How often you need to be in front of your clients? How often do you need to follow up? They might set those specific sales quotas on minimum numbers. Um, and obviously, sometimes in your compensation plan, it shows if you do 10% over your goal, you get X money. If you do 15%, you get X money. If you do 20%, you get more money. So they set quotas ahead of time. Hopefully, they're realistic. And then in terms of the numbers, it's also revenue dollars. And that might not equate to directly the revenue because maybe you have specific, maybe they tell you you need to have 5 new customers in a year. That could be a very different metric than sales revenue because your existing customers, maybe you're really good at cross selling. Remember, we talked about that? Selling different lines of product to your existing customers. Good with repeat orders. Remember that? And so you can get more revenue out of your existing customers. And maybe you only get 3 new customers in a year, but your revenue is way up. Now, if your company ahead of time sets this parameter of got to have 5 new customers, but you know you're driving a tremendous amount of revenue with your existing customers, maybe you could lobby upper management and say, hey, you know what? I'm still your top performer, even though I'm not getting all these new clients, but you're penalizing me because I'm getting more out of my existing clients than anybody else in the company. And so, now maybe they'll see you're more adding more value. Okay, maybe don't make a special exception for you. You still need 5, but now maybe they'll be a little bit more accommodating. What that means 5 new customers. Maybe it's an existing customer that buys a new product that you have. I don't know, and you can count that as a new customer, right? So maybe they're a little more willing to explore that with you. You know, um, they'll set margins. Think about this. So, again, when I was in the book business and when I got in custom publishing, which is taking existing books that we have and material that the professor would have and creating a new customized version, either online or in print. I could do all that. That was my job and selling that to a customer. And I would work with the salespeople. So I'd be an intermediary kind of. I'd work with the salesperson. I was also in sales, but I had a higher level role. But in order to build a product for a customer, there was a certain cost to that. And I would have to have a certain margin that I would make. I couldn't just discount the book like a significant amount and make no money. My company set parameters. So it allows this word motivation, it motivates a sales force to create more profitable products, right? And this is the system. People say you game the system, right? Salespeople, the upper management would set goals that might be really high. So how could we get those goals? This is happening in the financial industry. I think it was Wells Fargo Bank. Maybe you had um, a bank account with them or know of that bank. Their salespeople at their branches, because the um, company executives set up a system that said you need to sell X amount of product, X amount of dollars, and it was significantly high. Well, they were like, there's no way we can make these sales quotas unless we're a little bit unethical, unless we kind of sell people things they don't need as much. In the financial industry, that's happened, and it still happens, right? And so they're setting up these quotas. Gets into the chapter 2 in terms of the ethics. Your company might not be so ethical. How do you deal with that? And then, of course, a lot of these employees at Wells Fargo were like, my quotas are so high, I got to be, really aggressive in going after customers and selling them the things they don't need. This went on for years to the point where they lost, there were a lot of lawsuits and the government stepped in and fined Wells Fargo hundreds of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions in fines because of what they did. maybe as a company you need to look for another job, right? So think about that. That's not all bad, right? It's just I'm just giving you examples of how things are some gray areas. They also set, sales management sets compensation. They set how you get evaluated. Think about this. You work for a company. Do you have a performance review? How often do you get reviewed? Once a year, twice a year, once a month? Never. Um, you should have a review. The sales group sets your compensation. They set the parameters of your review. Do you have a good relationship with your boss? This gets back to your direct report. Who's reviewing you? Can you push back on some things? Do you have a good enough relationship with your direct manager, your direct report, that you could push back on a few things? If, for instance, they're incentivizing the big group and they have a budget of how much money they can give in bonus, and you're doing really well, can you push and promote yourself even better to your boss? So maybe you get a bigger chunk of the change, even if your company has a down year. So think about this as a salesperson. This is important to kind of understand. If you're going into sales, if you're there right now, different ways you get paid. You may get a salary or some incentive pay. Okay, salary, regular payments every month, every couple of weeks. Incentive pay is tied to performance. This is like a bonus. It's like a commission. You get 10 new clients in 6 months, you get X amount of dollars more. You get, if you bring in $40,000 more in revenue, you get an additional $1,000 bonus. You get 2% of all the new revenue you bring in beyond goal. 2% on top of that might be tens of thousands of dollars. There's incentive. So the commission basically is how much you get from one sale. A bonus impacts like overall performance in an area. Remember I said if I worked with my expense money better, didn't go over, but maybe manage my expenses well, I got an extra $1,500. It's kind of nice. So it would kind of force me, and then sometimes it's like having your boss go out with you on a call and take your client out to lunch. So it didn't come off your bonus, your expenses. It was their expenses. You get creative. You have to be creative. If you're a salesperson, you're creative and resourceful, right? And you're very capable. So if those are the keys, if you have to be creative, you need to be creative. Well, then you play the game a little bit, right? You still have to have an impact with your customers. Okay. So let's just finish this one and then we'll take a break here. Okay. And about the compensation and evaluation. So you can have a straight salary, which is just fixed amount of money. It might be low, it might be medium, it might be high. So, you know, you could, you're interviewing for a job. Sometimes you negotiate salary, right? Sometimes not. Sometimes this team of salespeople, you know, sometimes we sell as a team. And so, like a group of customer service people or inside salespeople, say that they're inside, they're telesales, they're on the phones. Um, Maybe there's a group of 17 of them. Their whole group might get a bonus. Their whole group might have an individual salary. Okay. So it works individual, it works in bonus as a group. And then the other thing, think about other aspects of the marketing mix are, sometimes they're more important than just your own efforts, right? Again, it might be your team, my region. I worked, in sales. There's a district which has like 6 salespeople. The region had like 20 salespeople. If our region does well, there's an extra bonus. So me individually, good, but I might think about this. My boss, if I'm in sales or whatever, even if I'm in a managing a project, my boss might manage 6 other salespeople, 6 other project managers. I might be the top performing one. I might not. They have other people to deal with. So not always is your direct, obviously your direct impact is important, but you have to think about the larger team aspect. Okay. All right. So we'll get into this a little bit more. Let's take a break. We've been going for an hour and 10 minutes already. Let's take 10 minutes. We'll come back. We'll finish up this chapter, and you'll start to see kind of how this might impact more in your role. Um, again, if outside of the selling process. Okay. All right, let's take a break, 10 minutes. I'll see you all back in 10. All right, welcome back, everyone. All right, so a little bit of housekeeping things. So let me just reiterate for those of you, just see, I believe most of you already have gotten the um, assignment number 2 done. There's still a few of you that have still need to take some of the quizzes that are left in the class. All the quizzes are posted. There'll be no new quizzes being added, the short quizzes. So make sure those of you that are either listening on recording or live, make sure that you have 100 um, points worth of quizzes that you've taken. Um, and if one of the quizzes you missed, I've had to, open this up for a few people that they, you know, um, the quiz closed down on them, but they still hadn't taken it. I'm willing to open up a quiz again if there's a good reason for it, um, so that you can make sure you get your full points for that. Um, Obviously, assignment 1 is long past, but make sure those of you that have not turned in assignment 2, you still get that in. Again, if you're watching, I'm recording. Hopefully, you get that in. You'll be penalized because it's late, but I will still grade it, and you'll still get some points. Okay. Final exam. Um, I want to give you, and I mentioned this last week, last class. I'm going to give you a good 10 days to take the exam because I know people travel. It's going to be 100 questions, very similar to the types of questions that you've already been using and seeing in your quizzes. It will cover every chapter from 1 to 16 that we get through today. It will not cover next week's chapter, 17. Um, and that's because I'm going to be posting the exam um, definitely by Thursday of this week, perhaps by end of day tomorrow, my time in the evening. So that may be, Thursday morning for you all, depending on where you're at. Um, and I will leave it up until, the final date. Um, I think you'll have 2 weeks or so. I can actually give you a date that, let me look at my calendar where I have it here. Um, our last class, if it is a class, because this is an exam, would be the 25th. So it won't be a lecture. Um, so I'll leave it up at least until there. So that gives you almost, probably more than 10 days, probably 11 days to get it done. Okay. Um, if there's an issue and you can't get it done in that time, I need to know right away. Um, for the exam. But I think 10 to 12 days for a final exam gives you, again, if you've been keeping up with the quizzes, you won't have any issues with this. It'd be good to review, look at the slides, look at some of your previous quizzes, but you won't have any issues getting it done and doing well on it. Okay. I'm not going to ask you surprise questions that we did cover that weren't in the classes, that weren't in the quizzes before. In terms of the concepts, is what I'm saying. Okay. So look for that. I will actually post a note in the WhatsApp group and say, okay, the quiz is the final exam is ready for you to take. Um, I know some other instructors do it differently, but I wanted to make sure you had enough time to get it done. You'll only have one opportunity to do it, meaning you won't be able to go back like some of these quizzes um, to do it a second time. You put in one answer. If it's wrong, it's wrong. You can't go back and redo it. Okay. It's a final exam, right? You're used to that. Little bit of risk reward here. Um, okay. Have any questions about that? Um, while you have me live, any questions about assignments that we've done, quizzes? Um, let's see, John, we need to answer chapter 1 to 16. Yes. Um, so in the book, chapters 1 through 16 will be covered. Okay. 17 is all about um, your career, which is important, right? Resumes, interviewing, a little bit more in emotional intelligence. You're welcome. Um, and that's important, but it's not going to be on the quiz, on the exam, the final. It's just that way everybody will have either the recordings or this live session. Um, and every chapter we've covered every chapter in the book aside from the last chapter. We'll cover that next week. And that's a good chapter. It's a really good way to leave. It's a good foundation. But again, that one, chapter 17, will not be on the book. Um, and just to kind of throw a couple things out. Remember the two assignments we did, especially number one. And I talked about, in terms of the buyer behavior process, those 8 steps. I would suggest you know that pretty well because there'll be a lot of questions on that. Well, there'll be 100 questions, but there'll be quite a few questions about that from that chapter. Okay. Think about, the adaptive selling, think about active listening, think about handling objections, think about setting goals, objectives, think about effective communication styles, think about negotiation skills. Um, again, nothing you haven't seen in terms of topic coverage on the quizzes. So if you've handled all the quizzes, you're going to be good to go. Um, let's see, this week, somebody's let's see here. Okay, we'll handle that offline. Send me a direct message, Sean. Okay, send me a WhatsApp of specifically what you need, and we could address that. Okay. Um, all right. So sorry. Let's get back to our lecture and let's finish up this chapter. Okay. So and I want you to kind of put this in your, you don't have to put down how much you're making. Okay. But I'm curious of the people that are on here. Um, as we talk about um, compensation, I'm just curious, and based on your roles, how you're paid. Are you paid a salary? Do you paid a salary and bonus? Do you get a commission? Do you get a quarterly bonus? And start to think about how much, if you get a bonus, how direct impact that you have for that. And think about, are you able to negotiate at all any of these numbers with your company or your boss? Obviously, you can always ask for more money, right? But are you, getting bringing new clients in? Is there a bonus pool for that? So I'm just curious, if you could just put in, one or two words, I get a straight salary, I get a commission plus bonus, I get this and that. I'm just curious all of what people have out there as we talk about this. Because you start to think about it as you get a new job, as you get a new role, what would you like? What would be ideal for you? How do you want to set the table ahead of time for yourself? So with commission is a little different. Commission again pays a certain amount of money per sale, um, and it's not tied to the salary. So for instance, I have a couple of partners that I work with. and my partners help me get business. So if a partner or pretty much anybody recommends a potential client to me, a prospect, and I close the sale, lack of a better word, I close the sale literally. That is what I do. But if I bring them on as a new client, I give my um, partner X amount of dollars for every one they give me. So sometimes it's 20%. So if they bring me a new client and I have a coaching package that they get for, say, $1,500, they get 20% of that because I would not have had that customer if they didn't provide me the referral. And so then it becomes more incentive. This is why commission is so important. It's an incentive. It's an added incentive to do what you're doing, but it maybe motivates you a little bit more. And so you can kind of think about there's a base. Sometimes commission give you a base, and how you're paid, right? You have to do X amount of dollars and then you'll get some commission money. Or there's a rate, um, you sell this coaching package and you get paid $300 or whatever. Um, so I'm just looking here. Let's see. Somebody gets a fixed salary and bonuses. And here's the thing too. Think about this. Elena puts in bonuses depend on a type of project and the role in the project. So it's individual. So again, it impacts directly. This goes back to incentive. Does it incentivize you to do a better job? I mean, that's what the compensation packages are all designed for. But in terms of our roles, and as we go and sell ourselves with the next company, with our boss, with whomever it is we're working, as we start to interview um, for a new role in our company or a new company, um, a new role with a new company, know what the plans are. Compensation. Some people have fixed salary and bonuses. Um, that's so again, you can kind of start to see as we kind of evaluate where we're at, because again, part of negotiation is, the two questions, what do you want and where are you at? We talked about that last week and the week before. Where am I at and what do I want? And so as you negotiate, as you get skilled at that, you have to have I want X, but I'm willing to take Y, like a minimum. Because you might take a job, you might, a new project in your group that's difficult, knowing that if you do a good job on it, it could lead to more bonus. Maybe it's a longer term project. Instead of 6 months, it's 9 months. Demand more of your resource time. But if you do a good job on it, you get more bonus. So there's flexibility. Um, and so start to think about that as you explore in your career. And we'll talk a little bit about that next week. We'll actually talk a lot about that next week. Um, this is how it fits in. This is why we're talking about this kind of thing. This is how people get paid. If you don't already get a commission, maybe there's a point where you'll have a job where you do get a commission. If you don't have a bonus, maybe later on you will. Maybe there's other types of compensation plans here we'll talk about. A hybrid, commission and salary, a lower salary, but with a higher commission potential. In sales, this is very prevalent. You get $50,000 and the potential to make commissions of another $50,000. And you have to then think about, okay, what is the potential to make that other 50? Or some companies do not cap. You could make X amount of commissions with unlimited if you keep selling. Sometimes they put a cap on it. And then, there's bonuses. Again, bonuses are paid, they're lump sums. Sometimes they're tied to salary, I mean, sales. Sometimes they're not. Like I said, there's a bonus for, you know, um, managing expenses. I had a bonus for a particular kind of customer that my company wanted. You know, they wanted, in particular, I had a bonus. They had new products coming in the textbook business, new textbooks, brand new books in math. And so if we sold those books and we did well with them because they were brand new books, they would, a new edition of a book, never been in the marketplace before, a new author, we get an extra bonus. And then, there's contests. If you're in sales, they run contests. You will take the top 5 salespeople that sell in the next 6 months in terms of your dollars. And if you're in the top 5, will uh, one of you will pull out of the name out of a hat and you'll win a new MacBook. That's pretty cool, right? um, or an iPad or something. So there's always companies doing things like that too. Um, not always, but a lot of times, especially in sales. There's also this thing called a commission versus draw, meaning that your company will pay you a commission, which is not guaranteed, but a draw is kind of like they'll give you $1,000 a month and you have to sell X amount. And if you don't sell X amount, they'll pull money out of that money they give you. So you can almost be guaranteed $1,000 a month. I know that's not a lot, but we'll just throw that as a number. It's easy to quantify. And so if you sell X amount, you get that and you get more money. If you don't, well, 1 month you only sell half of what you need to, they'll pull out $500. So you get $500. So it kind of is a little bit more guaranteed. You kind of know, all right, if I meet the goal at least, I'll get X amount. Sometimes they work in that way. All right. Let's talk a little bit about um, different types of salespeople. We've touched on this before. We'll talk about the management role too, because if you're in sales or if you're an employee, think about this. Maybe you already manage a team. Okay, maybe you don't. Maybe you manage a team of engineers. Maybe you manage your product managers. Maybe you manage other salespeople. Maybe you're in marketing and you manage 2 other assistants. Maybe you manage nobody. But I want you to kind of think about this as a skill set. Sales management is a skill set because here's the thing: you might have your own individual territory, but then you're managing other people's territories. So you do the hiring. Maybe you already do hiring. Think about that. If you do hiring, of those that are on right now, just put a note in the chat. I do hiring. I'm just curious too um, if you do hiring. Maybe you hire an assistant. Maybe you hire other employees. That takes a skill set. That is a very valuable thing if you do. You can be learned, of course, right? But a manager hires. They also evaluate performance. Company might give them specific metrics to use, but there's always subjective um, criteria because things are contextual, meaning it's based on your territory. Like I said, when I was in a territory and some of the colleges had really poor enrollments for a couple of years, my area where I was, there was people leaving. Other areas of the country were growing enrollment. And that just happens. It's like migration of people moving out of where I'm at, people moving more into California and Florida, the warmer climates, or they're moving out of California now, probably in the United States, they're moving more down to Florida or warmer climates. And COVID, a lot of people moved into different places, but evaluating performance is important. Um, do you write evaluations for others? What do you need to know there? How do you rate your salespeople? How do you rate the customer service level? How do you rate their knowledge of products? How do you rate other less tangible things? Are they punctual? Do they follow up? Do they do good paperwork? Are they timely? Another piece, another big responsibility of a sales manager, even, you may have this role and you don't manage people. You might train new hires. Do you train new hires? Do you train others in your role? Maybe you're getting help in your project and you train people on what are the scope of the project here? What are we doing? What do I need to be doing? Right? So you could have a lot of these functional things that you need to be doing as a manager. But the role of a manager, certainly they're going to do hiring. Certainly they're going to evaluate people's performance. And certainly they're going to spend some time in training. Now you may have other systems set up where salespeople train salespeople. The experienced salespeople train the newer ones. And the manager comes in and evaluate that. The manager makes sure that they choose the right experienced salesperson to train. Because just because a salesperson is a good salesperson doesn't mean that they're a good manager. I've had this before. Um, I don't know if I shared this story with you. If I did, it was very early on. But when I was in the varnish and floor finish industry, I had a boss that hired me. Was terrific, trained me. Was really great, and he got promoted. He became a regional manager. So they took one of the salespeople in my team of 6 salespeople in my region and promoted them to a manager. They were not a people person. They were terrific in sales, but they were not very good in managing people. And what happened all of a sudden? They made it so difficult to work as an employee that a lot of the salespeople, out of the 6, well, 5, and then one new was hired to replace, 3 of them left in the first year. I stayed around for a little bit longer, but it was just painful. This person, and you may know that. You may have a manager that is not great with people. Sometimes you have to deal with that, right? We all have to deal with difficult people. That is part of this course, right? Communicating with difficult people. How do we do it? Um, so think about that. But, you know, if you hire somebody that is not good in sales management, doesn't mean that they can't be good, but maybe you have to train them more and you have to be aware of what their role is. So just start to think about that, you know. Ethics, ethics in management. Um, we talk a little bit about this too, right? Your company sets policies up. Maybe they're not exactly fully ethical. When I was in the book business, my company would, and this happens in sales organizations. They want to move up sales, meaning that okay, their fiscal year ends in December, and so there's a lot of sales that normally flow into January. What could we do to incentivize customers so that instead of giving them the order in January, they give us the order in December? It inflates this year's sales. They did it all the time. We offer free shipping, we give extra dating, um, we'll ship in extra product, all kinds of things. Because if they took, but then again, if you're taking money from January sales and putting it into December, what are you going to need to do next year? Come December, same thing. Because if you don't, then you're going to have a shortfall. It's not going to be comparing apples to apples. So I didn't always like that. And think about this too. Sometimes there's salespeople or different people, functional areas of your company that aren't always ethical. I had this also. I had product support people, we'll call them technology specialists. They would still travel the territories and they would promise customers extra product, extra things that could not really be delivered in a um, efficient, profitable way. But they would make promises to customers. And I would be the one to have to clean it up. They would say, we could put together this package for you at this price and ship it in. And then when I looked at the profitability, I'm like, we can't do that. That doesn't make sense. But they already promised the customer. And so they put me in a bind. Is that really ethical? Because they actually wanted sales. And then what they would do is they would actually inflate the numbers so that I would look at it and say, oh, that's a good opportunity. They would tell me that this particular enrollment has 400 students, 400 new books, and it actually only had 300. But I was computing the profitability based on 400. Now, when it only had 300, my numbers were off. I couldn't go back and say, okay, customer, you need your students need to pay more money. Would you like that if Windsor University all of a sudden said, you know what, the course fee that you have for there, I'm very sorry, but you're going to have to pay 40% more this semester because we made an error. What would you say? Got to pay an extra $200. You would not like that, right? I wouldn't. Um, that's what I had to do. So there's ethics, and how do you manage it? So I actually went to my boss and said, "Can you help me handle this internal relationships?" And so they were able to handle it in a little different manner. So it didn't happen again. Okay. They ensure, bosses ensure, again, you have to good relationship with them, that good things happen over time. That if something is not ethical, that it gets resolved and so it doesn't happen again. Okay, start to think about some of these other things. Managing ethics in sales. We talked about that back in chapter 2. So we're coming almost full circle here within the sales process. Ethics for sales executives. They need to kind of think about if they're developing formal policies and they have 100 salespeople in their sales force, or those in your company, and if they have 20 software engineers, they're setting policies for you and how you promote your business. So they have to think about that, managing the ethics in doing that, making sure the training is, um, we had, um, as a salesperson, there's sales training. And I remember, and this is a big topic right now, but maybe 25 years ago, it wasn't looked at as much. Diversity training. You probably heard that diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so, back 20 plus years ago, people are getting trained in that, in terms of hiring, in terms of communicating with those that are different and setting things up. Now it's big. Now everybody talks about that. Um, so there were always, formal training courses in that. Um, and if you're a manager, to kind of think about it, it's I highlighted in red here, open door policies. Again, if you're a manager, what do you want to be known as with your employees, those that work for you? Do you want to have an open door policy, meaning that they can come to you when there's an issue? They can come to you with their concerns, that they don't have to go above you to get things handled, which is not great. It happens, right? If my boss is not giving me what I want, I'm going to go back to my regional manager. That happened in the varnish business. This boss that was hired that wasn't great with people, was great in sales, not great as a people manager. Um, it got to be so bad the 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 manager didn't want to hear anything about it. So I went above to his boss, my old boss, and said, "Hey, this is what's going on. Could you tell him to chill a little bit? Because as you see, he's lost 3 people already, and he may lose 4 if he continues it. Because I'm going to be looking." Um, Yeah, and I kind of tongue in cheek, I didn't threaten it, but I kind of was like, yeah, was kind of joking around. You don't want to keep losing. These are your best people here. Um, and it turns out we left anyway after 2 years because it wasn't resolved. And then they brought in somebody else to manage. Okay, a little too late. As a field, if you got a field sales manager, those are people that actually go in the field. So I had a bosses in the textbook business or when I was selling flooring stains, they would travel to my customers with me. Sometimes you have a boss that's just internal. They work in a home office. They don't come out on the sales calls with you. They don't go see your clients with you. Sometimes they do. So if they do, if you're in that role, then of course you're helping close the sales. Sometimes you're helping demoing the product. You're helping um, managing the objections that you're getting, helping deal with those, helping train, right? And of course, if you're a field sales manager, I mean, this just goes to say, you don't want to be teaching your hires high pressure techniques and manipulative selling. If you notice certain things are unethical, you talk to them about it. Okay. Some strategies for handling unethical requests. Um, Again, if you're a manager, think about this. You're leaving an organization, you're asking for a transfer, negotiating alternative courses of action. Hmm. So here's the thing sometimes is, again, there's a lot of gray area here. You're working with your current customer, a buyer, negotiating a deal. Okay. You're getting all that done. But you know that your buyer um, can purchase other products from you, but they don't directly have a say. You don't directly handle those products. It's another salesperson. Maybe there's, I sell the paint, somebody else sells the clear finishes. So they only have so much money that they can spend. Is it fair if I boost my sales of the paints that I have? He's going to have less money to buy the clear finishes for the other salesperson. Is that unethical? Or is that using resources differently? Again, gray area. You got to think about that. And some of these other things, if you think about, you know, um, if you're an employee and you see some unethical things from another employee, do you tell your boss? Blowing the whistle, right? Happens. Um, I don't know. Again, gray area. How do you want to be known as in your company, right? You want to be the tattletale. You want to be the one that's always, going stepping in stuff where maybe you don't belong, or are you have a responsibility to your company to see it it's looked at highly, and if you see something not working, I think I might have mentioned this. We had a company um, in the book business, lots of salespeople. Somebody was we would get physical copies of the textbooks, and this particular employee got many copies that they're sample copies we'd give to a professor, but they would collect them because they're almost as good as cash. You could sell a physical textbook back to a bookstore or to somebody that would buy it and give you money for it, not as much as you paid initially, but something. So they knew they were leaving, and they loaded up their car with thousands of dollars of textbooks, thousands of dollars that they sold. And so when I was, company car was part of the compensation plan for this particular job. Another way to look at it, it's kind of nice to have a company car. They pay all the expenses and a company car. The salesperson had all these extra sample copies, and they should have been in the car when I took the car from them. They had nothing in there, which means that they sold the thousands of dollars worth. What am I going to do? Right? I'm just picking up the car, but I knew what was happening. So I told my boss, but again, the person's leaving. What are they going to do? This happens. Um, is that unethical? Probably. And, they were not there to sell, but they were getting fired anyway. So I guess they figured, I'm going to show you, I'm going to, get some extra money. So all these things can happen. Um, let's talk about different types of salespeople in terms of accounts. And you may already know this. It's pretty basic stuff. So we won't spend a lot of time on it. Geography. We're assigned a specific territory geographically. And if you're inside sales, if you like everything is done at home and it's online, the geographies might overlap, but sometimes they don't. You might have specific accounts, right? When I was in the book business, I had specific schools I would call on, specific departments, specific uh, subject areas. Others I didn't. There was another salesperson that called on some another area. And sometimes there were two salespeople that would call on the same department. This is where it got a little bit uh, difficult sometimes because I was selling psychology books and I didn't have a counseling book that was a different salesperson. Another salesperson would come in, they would sell their counseling books. Similar, but not exactly the same. To the same professor. Here, a same company competing with another salesperson for the business. Again, gray area. How do you deal with that? You better have a good relationship with your manager, your direct report, to work through issues like that, because there's going to be things like that that arise. All right. Types of salespeople. There's lots of different kinds of salespeople. There's national sales managers, national account managers. These are go beyond the geography. They manage bigger accounts. They coordinate activities of a lot of salespeople. So they are like the boss of the sales accounts, if you could kind of think about that. And they're executives and they coordinate those all the salespeople under them, but they're the national account manager. And again, maybe they're just very large accounts that you need a specific person to handle. And so those, and then sometimes they're inside accounts, like we'll call them house accounts, internal. They're handled by sales or marketing. There's smaller accounts a lot of times. Maybe there's not a lot of commissions paid. Maybe they are key accounts, but they're small. So they're in-house accounts. And again, in the book business, we had some schools, some colleges that were very tiny. Maybe their enrollment was 1,000 students, 500 students, very small. And it wouldn't be worth my time to spend on that campus calling on it. So we would have an internal person call on that school. Okay, more efficiency. Sometimes there's product specialists. Sometimes there's a product specialist, and we had this. Sometimes you just work in psychology, or you just work in math. You're a technology person that you just work in the technology group. Um, so there's lots of roles and types of salespeople. And so again, it's not just a field salesperson or inside salesperson, which there are. Field meaning that um, you work in your own location in the field, inside or at the company headquarters. Could be customer service people. Nowadays, again, customer service is set up where it could be in an office, it could be at your home. A lot of the airlines, they have people working at their homes. Like if you call Delta Airlines, most of the people, yes, there's a corporate office, but 30% of those people work in their home. So if I call customer service, yeah, they get all the data. And then this was even before COVID. So, but there are call centers in the world. There's many call centers. India is a big place that has like customer service call centers. The Philippines, um, and so there's businesses that all they do is customer service. That's their business. And they support other companies with customer service people. So you may have customer service people that don't work for your company, but that support you. You may have that role. Then there's this, we'll close out on this concept of team selling. Okay. So team selling is exactly what it sounds like, a group of salespeople that partner to close an account. So each team member, and you think back to that chapter we did on presentations, right? We had group presentations we talked about, designing a presentation, making it more effective with slides and visuals and things. And then we talk about if you're selling in that, if you're presenting in that, you have to think about the different functional areas within that in terms of if there's drivers, if there's expressives, and if you're handling objections in a group setting in that dynamic, how do you make sure everybody's heard, right? So think about that, remember that, and then come to now team selling. Now you're selling in a group. If you're selling in a group, which happens sometimes, maybe some larger accounts, there's a tech person, maybe somebody's responsible for the actual, they're really good at negotiation. Maybe there's somebody really good at knows the quality of the products. Maybe they're like really good in the customer service end. And those three people go in and try to sell the business, like high ticket items. I mentioned my friend, a friend of mine before, that sells the machines that cut the granite, these hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollar machines that cut granite for countertops and bar tops and things. And he goes in and he has a technology, like a tech person, not technology, but like a tech support person that knows the ins and the outs of these machines. He doesn't. But when he closes a business account and he goes and scouts the new business, he brings this tech person with him that has all the product knowledge of how to service this machine, how to get it handled. He sells as a team. And because he does that, he has a specific responsibility to be the front line of the customer, to be meaning that he is the one that if there's a problem, he gets to know about it first, but then he gets his tech person involved. And so a lot of times it's making sure, if you sell in a team, if you manage a project and you're a project manager and divvying up the responsibilities, making sure everybody has a specific responsibility and they know their area of expertise and they know what they're responsible for. That's important. This is a really nice graphic to kind of start to think about this selling as a group in team selling. So there's usually in a selling organization, there's this VP of sales, like a top salesperson, and maybe there's an account manager, right? We said like a national account manager. We talked a little bit about that. Maybe they manage the larger accounts. And then within that, right, you can see layers of organizational management here. There's account managers. Account manager might be a salesperson. They manage specific accounts that they have responsibility. Maybe you three regions of the country that you're living in, three regions of the world. And then within each of those, there's also like the computer specialist, the component specialist, the test equipment specialist, meaning that functional areas support each of the account managers. And so you see how there's this relationship you could see here. And the VP of sales only deals with the direct national account manager. Okay. But that national account manager manages a lot of responsibility. They have account managers under them, plus all the supervisory roles that help the account managers. You could see why if you're that account sales manager, you probably make more money than the account managers. And that's the way the VP of sales probably makes more than the national sales manager does. Let's just kind of start to think about, where are you in your company right now? Where are you on the hierarchy? Is there a path for you to be promoted? And if it is, where will you be next? Is it just money, or is it a more responsibility? Do you want to be a manager of people? Maybe you already are. Maybe you're not and you do want to be. So as we kind of close this chapter out, you can kind of see, if you want to manage people, it's a very different responsibility than just managing your own individual territory, your own project. As we got into, you might have to do hiring, you might have to do training, you have to evaluate. Are you good at those? Can you learn those? Do you want to know those? And then the last thing to think about here, this multi-level selling, because that's what it comes down to. If your company is really good, if your company is um, has good lines of communication within all the different functional areas, every group has a little bit of sales in them, meaning that they know internally how they need to communicate. They know internally. I'm going to close this because I think we're um, done with the chapter here. They know internally how well they need to communicate within each functional area. And so this multifaceted sales, it's adaptive selling for every person in the company. And they may be accounting people, and they may be finance people, and they don't have a big role in dealing with others, but they do in a sense. So how do they relate? How can they communicate with others? Again, there might be a legal team in your company, and there were in publishing. Sometimes I had to negotiate contracts, and I needed an attorney to get into the details of how to negotiate that, the legal aspect. I'm not an attorney. I had to collaborate as one. Give you an idea how I collaborated in functional areas, and I'll close with this. I was a salesperson in the textbook business and custom publishing, building content for other professors. I had a sale, I had customers that wanted to build a textbook. They had their own material, they wanted to use part of our material, they wanted content that wasn't created yet. We had to hire people that did that. Then they wanted to negotiate the terms of the contract and how many units that they would be required to sell and the price beyond what I could do. And so we had a legal person. So I had my boss, this is called about team selling. On a conference call once, I had the customer, which is a professor. I had the professor, they had three professors because they had the co teacher, and they had the international professor, meaning somebody taught the same class in Florence, Italy. It was an Italian textbook. And so there were three professors on the call, and their school, this was Columbia, this was New York University, there had a legal. So they had four people on the call. So then I had myself, my head attorney, the legal team, um, the person, my boss, and also the head technology person, because there was some software involved in this as well, building uh, additional software that we haven't created yet. And so we had 8 people on the call, team selling on a conference call. This was before Zoom. Um, and we had multiple conference calls to get it all ironed out. And then I'm still in the meantime selling one-on-one, one-on-three myself to the customer to get it all handled. But sometimes in this whole selling process, in this whole process, you might only have individual, but you might have this combination, this multifaceted selling. Sometimes it's group, sometimes it's team. You know this in your probably roles right now. Sometimes it's just you and your boss producing something for your client. Sometimes it's just you. Sometimes it's your team. Sometimes it's your team in different functional areas of your work. Sometimes it's short term, sometimes it's long term. you can kind of see this whole process in terms of um, the dynamic of sales. It is pretty exciting, all the different areas that we can get into here. So whether you get into sales in your life, whether you're in sales now, whether you never be in sales, you will be selling. You will have opportunities to buy, as we talked about that in assignment one, right? There's lots of, you'll have opportunities to negotiate. You'll have opportunities to communicate, to listen better, to be a more adaptive in how you present yourself, to understand that people have different personalities. People are going to have objections to what you want. How can you handle those? Are you good at asking questions? Can you probe and uncover objections and uncover the need behind the need behind the need? Not just be satisfied with the first answer that they give you, but probe and ask open and closed end questions in a way that does handle that. So that that is it right now. In terms of the material, we've covered the first 16 chapters. Like I said, the final exam will include everything up until today from the very first chapter that we got into. And that will be up in the next 2 days. You'll have access to that for at least the next 10 days. It's 100 questions. Like I said, it'll give you time to study. I've told you a couple of times that it will be, um, if you did the quizzes and you did well on the quizzes, you will absolutely have a good chance to do well on the final exam. There won't be any surprises. Um, if there are surprises, they might be good surprises. Okay, um, for you on the exam. All right, so that's what I have for you today. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll meet again next Tuesday. That will be our last official class with new content. Um, so if you have any questions about the final exam, send them into me in the WhatsApp group. You can certainly ask them during the next class. Um, Last piece, about those that have not gotten the assignment in for number two, is 50 points, and you want to make sure you get it in. Because if you don't, you're going to get zero, and you're going to start off your grade will not be good even if you got 100% on everything else. So even if it's late, get it in. Um, you'll get some credit for it. Um, and that's all I have for you today. Okay, so thank you. Have a good rest of your evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're at in the world. And I'll see you all then. Okay. All right. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Goodbye.